We're back in studio for episode number 10. We made it 10 episodes. That's a pretty good milestone for us. I'm your host, Cody Kelly, joined with my co-host, Scott Brown. And student correspondent is in today, Charlie Meyer.
Well, it's that time of year, Kelly. It's about ready to get rolling with the spring sports. And this was the big week of March Madness. Lots of brackets were busted the last 2 days.
Yeah, I'm just glad I had St. Peter's over Kentucky in mind.
Yeah, there's a lot of disappointed people. Usually you get a couple people that roll out of crazy bracket and haven't missed any yet. And I think ESPN this morning said 0 brackets are perfect now after the end of the first round.
Yeah, it's been a crazy start to March Madness, and now we get a crazy start to March today. We'll talk about that in a little bit.
Yeah, we've got a busy day. Both of us do.
Before we get there, though, let's jump out to Riverbend for the Riverbend Roundup. I think volleyball wrapped up their season this week.
Yeah, Coach Carrico and Coach Brown wrapped up their volleyball seasons this week with a couple of home games. The seventh graders ended up with a couple of wins this week. They finished at 6-5 on the season and competed in the Washington tournament. And Coach Brown said the seventh grade got better as the year went on. She had some inexperienced kids and kind of found a way to mix and match, but successful season overall. The eighth graders ended up with a tough loss. Their last match, I think they lost in 3. They finished around 500 as well, and it's a short season. You got to jump in and get right after it, and hopefully the girls have fun and get better, but they wrapped that volleyball season up, and now they're looking forward to summer camp.
And then onto the track side of things, their first meet is March 28th. So after we come back from spring break, they'll get their season rolling with their first meet of the year.
I think they take a long bus ride to Owensville for that first meet. I know Coach Missy was telling me she gets out of school early that day.
Yeah, well, speaking of a long bus ride to Owensville, let's go up to the 425 Indian Warpath. We got games today.
Yes, hopefully the rain holds off today.
We got rained out yesterday, but today we got baseball starting today and soccer starts today. It's a great Saturday morning.
Yeah, the JV squad, we're getting ready to do a little hitting before we head up to Windsor. We're in the Windsor JV tournament. Our last year, we finished second in our first JV tournament up at Windsor. We took on a really tough Jackson team last year. It's the same group that we face. We're in the same pool, Valley, St. John, and Windsor today, and then we'll play in bracket play on Tuesday at Windsor High School. And if anybody doesn't know, they have one of the nicest high school parks in the St. Louis area. It is all turf, and it is very nice and almost brand new.
Yeah, and then on the varsity side of things, we're going to head up to Owensville today about 12:45, I believe is our bus. Owensville has a brand new facility too. Last year they made their debut. They're hosting all 4 games of the Four Rivers Conference preseason tournament.
Yeah, I know the people in Owensville are really proud of their new on-site high school field with the turf infield, and I think they have lights now too, and they've done a lot of work up there. If you ever went to a game in Owensville back in the day, you know they played at City Park, and the facilities weren't that nice, and now they've got something shiny to show off to the Four Rivers.
We have a busy week, though, on the baseball side of things. There's game Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Yeah, it's baseball all spring break.
And speaking of another busy week, we'll go over to soccer now. They start their season today at Rolla Tournament, which got postponed and pushed back to today. It becomes a 2-game tournament. They play Northwest at noon and Borgia at 5. And they're in the same boat. I think they play Monday, Wednesday, Thursday next week. There's just a lot of stuff going on next week for all the spring sports, which we are very happy to see. We have something to talk about again.
Yeah, we are diving right into the action this week, there's no doubt. The golf team, we've kind of neglected to talk about the golf team. We do have a spring sport coached by Rob Shimza, and the golf team, the boys golf team, practices out at Birch Creek, and they make their debut soon as well. He's got 9 kids in the golf program. They're very young. I think he's got 1 junior, 5 or 6 sophomores, and a couple of freshmen in the golf program. So I know they're looking forward to good weather and getting started with their first meet.
Yeah, their first meet's March 24th versus St. James. It's a home meet at Birch Creek. I believe it's a 9-hole meet because it's after school. And then as we move on from golf, we got track coming up. Track's first meet is March 22nd. We won't dive a lot into the track program here because we have Charlie's Corner coming up, and he's one of our track athletes. We're going to let him talk a little bit about it, but anything you want to add to track?
No, I mean, just like us, they thrive off the good weather. I know they've got some really good individual event talent on the track team this year, but we'll let Charlie talk a little bit more about that to us.
Before we jump into Charlie's Corner, I just want to remind everybody programming today we have Mr. Andy Herbst on, who served as our athletic director for years and now has moved over to just an assistant principal role. It's one of the better interviews I've had, and he had a lot to talk about. We talked a little Mizzou basketball. As people know, he's a big Mizzou guy. So stick around for that one. That's going to be a great one.
Yeah, they had a new coaching candidate pop up last night that I really didn't know who he was, from the guy from Cleveland State, and I'm sure Mr. Herbst will love to pick our brains on that one later in the week.
Yeah, it's just too bad we recorded on Monday with him, so we didn't get a chance to update any of the new names that are going to pop up throughout March Madness.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll have him back on to break down the hiring whenever they make it. All right, now let's throw it down to Charlie for Charlie's Corner.
Well, Charlie, track season is upon us. Are you excited to get things started?
Yes, I am very excited for our first meet. It's been looking pretty well, and I'm just excited to get started on Tuesday.
Well, tell us real quick before you hit up what you prepared for us. What events are you participating in this year?
I am participating in JV, javelin, discus, and shot put this year.
The javelin's a cool event, Coach Kelly, don't you think?
Yeah, it's pretty fun to watch him just basically chuck a spear through the air.
You see it at the Olympics and stuff, but man, you're like, high school kids get to throw a javelin? I'm like, that is awesome.
It's newer. It hasn't been around for too long. I think they just brought it back a few years ago.
All right, what you got for us, Charlie?
All right, so the first meet is a quad meet with New Haven, Georgia, and Washington. And that is a home meet on Tuesday of spring break, which I believe is the 22nd. And that starts at 4 p.m. if anyone would like to come out and support the team.
Good deal. And you've got a little interview with a couple of the coaches you're going to share.
Yeah, this week I got a chance to sit down with both of the newly hired Coach Kings, and we just got a little bit of insight on their background and on the events that they're coaching.
Well, what do you say we throw it to that interview and see what they had to say?
This is Charlie Meyer, and I'm here with the pole vaulting coach, Coach Jay King, and the throwers coach, Coach Lex King. How you guys doing today?
I'm doing good. Coach King II, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic.
So, you're both new to coaching here. How's the season so far?
Season's going good. Everybody's been working really hard this season and getting warmed up for the first meet, so I'm excited to see how they do.
Give us a little background on your guys' track and field experience.
Okay, so I did track and field throughout high school. I was a heptathlete, so I kind of did a bit of everything. And then I went to the University of Hawaii for track and field on a scholarship and just focused primarily on javelin. So I've been doing javelin for a long time, but I did a little coaching with Special Olympics and kind of touched on different events in those areas. So,
As for me, I did track and field from middle school when I was in 7th grade all the way through senior year of high school. I actually went to Pacific High School, and I pole vaulted mostly. That's how people knew me. But track and field wasn't really my main sport. I usually played soccer.
And going into the other sports, I've heard that at least you have done other sports, but why don't you give us some information about those?
So for myself, I actually played baseball as a catcher for 8 years before ever touching a javelin or doing track and field. So a lot of the time I was focused on doing baseball, but once my coach saw me being a catcher and throwing far across from home to second, he was like, let's go into jav. So I've done that, volleyball, basketball in high school, but focused primarily on track at the end of high school.
As for me, I mean, I kind of explained, I've played soccer like my entire life from when I was 5 years old. So that's about as far back as I can remember playing that. I played basketball. I played baseball for a little bit throughout the years, but not anything important. But during high school season, it was soccer in the fall, basketball in the winter, and then I did track and field in the spring. But all year round, I played on a select soccer team with a bunch of college guys to try and get a soccer scholarship. But ended up joining the Navy instead and went a different route.
Yeah, and thank you for your service. Yeah, definitely going on the track. Me, myself, have done other sports. I can definitely see how that leads into track. Just kind of gonna wrap it up for today. Thank you guys for being here.
Thank you, Charlie.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thank you, Charlie, for that interview. And now as we move on in the show, we're getting close to everybody's favorite segment of the week. I think it's time for Performance of the Week. I've already had some kids talking about Performance of the Week at practice, and we haven't even played yet. I'm not sure how you're going to get that with just a good week of practice. I guess we could do stuff like that, but I don't get to see everybody's practice. So this week, as we get ready to start games, though, we had a big thing in the Merrimack Valley School District. We hired a new assistant superintendent, and we moved Dr. Katina Armstrong into that role. So for my Performance of the Week, it goes to Dr. Katina Armstrong being the new assistant superintendent for Merrimack Valley R3 School District.
Good choice.
Yeah, well, I mean, we had her on. We talked about how she's my fifth grade teacher, so I'm going to give her the nod here this week.
Yeah, anytime you can give a boss the nod, it's a good thing.
Her situation is kind of unique. I was thinking about this the other day. Is teachers get to watch their kids move on college and their careers. I had her as a fifth grade teacher, then I got to see her as a principal, and then director of communications, and now this role. So it's kind of reverse, where I get to see my former teacher move up through the district, which is kind of cool.
Yes, her husband, Jim. Well, I went to high school with Jim here at Pacific, and great guy. He's now with the Washington Police Department. I think he just got picked to be the chief. Talk about a power family here. We've got big time Jim and Katina Armstrong. They have a wonderful family, wonderful kids, which we've coached at Pacific. Strong family bond there, and they love our community and they serve our community, and very good pick for the district.
And I'll throw it to you. Were you able to think of one?
Yeah, without games, it was tough. I could generically go with, a couple upsets in the NCAA, but I'm going to pick since Coach Carter picked the athletes last week for spring sports, I'm going to give the nod to all the spring sport coaches and give them some love. There's a lot of hardworking individuals this week that are not on spring break per se, on a vacation or at the beach. We are bearing down on our season with, preparing track meets, trying to get kids in the right spots for our baseball lineups, getting our equipment ready, taking them to games, getting on buses, flying around everywhere this week. And it's very, very fun. That's why we do it. We love it, but it is also very, very hectic and a little bit stressful. And that's how we spend our break. So shout out to the golf, track, soccer, baseball coaches for what you do. And we appreciate you helping out at PHS.
I do know one coach that is on the beach this week during spring break, but I won't name her.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about that either.
Well, that just about wraps it up for us. Real quick, though, any picks for, I guess we don't have to do national champ. We can do it this week, and we might change it next week when somebody gets eliminated.
Yeah, it's wide open. I mean, I could see 8 different teams winning. I mean, Ohio State had a big win last night over a team that a lot of people thought were going to upset them. Wisconsin looked good. The Big Ten's looked pretty decent. Gonzaga didn't look real great in round 1. Arizona looked really good is it the Pac-12 now? Is that what they call that conference? So yeah. I'd have difficulty picking somebody. Has anybody caught your eye?
I went with Arizona to start the thing, so since they're still in it, I'll just keep riding with them until they get knocked out. Then I'll change my pick to somebody different.
Yeah, it'd be nice when we can get the Mizzou Tigers back in the dance consistently, because when I was growing up in high school and college, gosh, we had some good basketball teams, and it was fun to be a Mizzou homer. We need to get them back to be relevant.
Yeah, like I said, we're going to talk a little Mizzou basketball here in this interview coming up with Andy Herbst. So it's about time for us to go throw a little BP, get the machine set up. So we're going to have to get out of here. Thank you guys for listening this week. And like I said, don't go anywhere. We will be right back with Mr. Andy Herbst. And I'm back in studio, joined with our guest this week, Mr. Andy Herbst, our former athletic director, now principal here at the high school. Thank you for joining us.
Excited to be here, Cody.
Before we dive into just your other stuff, would you like to tell the people a little bit about your background and coaching days and what led you to Pacific?
It's a long time ago, but yeah, been in the district now 16 years. But before that, got my start at Union. I was from Union originally. That's where I started teaching and coaching at. Went to college, played baseball and basketball at East Central College. Graduated from UMSL. Got my first teaching job back in '96 at Union High School, and again started coaching from day one, basketball and baseball. My years there, I did basketball, baseball, softball, football, a little bit of everything. Ended up being a head coach of basketball before I got an opportunity to come to Pacific to be activities director.
And so what made you want to make that jump to be an athletic activities director?
I think more than anything, it was really good timing. A couple of different things. One, a lot of people actually don't know this, but my last year coaching, we had a really good team and in a lot of close, big games, exciting games. And I was having some health issues that last year and really having trouble, especially during those times, during those games, having some health issues. So, after the season's over, you kind of step back and reflect on some things. Of course, the last 4 or 5 years before that, I've been preparing myself for that switch to become an activities director at some point. I always knew that was something that I wanted to try. I had a really good relationship with Union Athletic Director at that time, David Eads, and so I spent a lot of time with him, just kind of what it was like to be an activities director. So I knew that I wanted to make that jump. I didn't know exactly then. I was still pretty young then when I made that jump. And so that was one of the reasons. Also, really, I would say I was always a multi-sport athlete type of guy. I just love seeing kids compete at the high school level and, being a part of different programs. And I think at that time, I wanted to see kind of how I can impact the overall scope of interscholastic athletics and not just one or two programs. So like I said, as this opportunity opened up, it was really just about timing. And again, I go back to one of the things that a principal once had said to me is there's nothing like a good athletic program and how it can change the culture of a school. And I always thought, I had that in the back of my mind. What if all of your programs were like that? How could it impact the school in a positive note? And then how could it impact the community? So that was really the reason I did it.
Speaking to that point, I would say it's been pretty successful run that you had here. You came in 05, 06 school year. You're still here in some capacity. I just think off the top of my head, I figured you had about 10 district titles in those times and no way to count the conference titles
right.
that we've had over that. So, but with that said, there's a lot of stuff that was positive. If I had to ask you, if you could pick a memorable moment or game as athletic director, as tough as that would be, if you have to narrow it down to a couple, you got one off your top of your head?
Gosh, I would hate to say one. I definitely wouldn't want to offend anybody by it. To be honest, like you said, we had so many good points throughout my career as activities director. I will tell you a couple of things that stand out to me when you think back on the different years and the different programs. One is we weren't just one program and that's what your school is known for. A lot of schools across the state of Missouri, there'll be one program. Everybody says that's this type of school. It's a baseball school. It's a wrestling school. It's a football school. It's a basketball school, cross country, whatever it may be. If you look at our banners in our school, it's not just one sport. All the sports had success over that time, and I think that's probably one of the things I'm most proud of. All of our sports achieved some level of success during that time, and of course, everybody has their ups and downs and their runs. But there are so many good things that happened. You look individually, we got a couple of coaches back here, wrestling coaches for us. I remember going and watching them at the state wrestling finals. There's nothing quite like those events when it's an individual and they win a state championship. Even placing at state, it's an awesome thing. Seeing Will Green place at cross country a couple of years ago was awesome. Probably the biggest event was when our boys basketball won districts a few years ago. one of who it was against, and then two, it just been ahead of a long drought as far as a district title for that program, and to see those coaches after spending that many years really working as hard as they possibly could to try to achieve that. And with that group, it was a really good group of young men. Just felt really good for them. But like I said, I wouldn't want to single anything out, only because, whether it be our softball team or our baseball team and big conference titles and district titles that they've had across the board, it's just been it was a lot of fun for those years.
Yeah, like you said, there's been a lot. A basketball moment definitely sticks out of my mind. That was a great game to be at. As we move over, there's a lot of things that changed during your time, especially, with the length of time that you were here in that capacity. I believe your first year on the job was when the baseball field got rebuilt. Mm-hmm. I remember that because it was my freshman year, and I had to go down there every day after school.
Yeah.
So then you also would have overseen the softball renovations, the new concession stand down there, the redid the track, the press box, the seating at the football field, the seating at the baseball field. So as an athletic director, a lot of people think about the program, but you got the facilities too. So you got to sort of track that. I mean, how much fun was that, or stressful was that to deal with those kind of things?
I'll be honest. I would assume that most ADs were like me going into it, and big projects like that, that's really something that they're probably not have a grand understanding of. And over the years, you kind of learn the ins and outs of those updates and how that all takes place. It's an awesome thing for an activities director to be part of any improvements to your school. But when it's facilities and the whole community can see it, it is really a neat thing. So anytime that we got that opportunity, and it's always a really a balance for a school district and to make sure you're spending the tax dollars and the funds that you have for a school district and doing it appropriately and how the community wants you to spend the money. So it's always a really tough thing. And you want to make sure anytime that you're doing that and investing dollars into your school district, that you want to make sure you end up with a good product. So to answer your question, it is really exciting, but it's also really stressful because if there's something that doesn't work out right, people are going to look at you if you're part of that process. I can remember one time when we finished we refinished the gym, which happens every so often, that you redo the floor and the paint probably every 10 years or so. And I just remember one time Mr. George being all upset at me because we had the mascot facing the wrong way when it was about halfway painted. And I told him, hey, we can just have this guy stop and flip it around if we want to. We didn't change it. We left it. But I made sure the last time we did it that we did flip that mascot or the logo in the center of the court around so it faced the other way. So anyway, stuff like that, it's brings back good memories when we had all those different things. When we put in the turf field, that was awesome. The new weight room, that was both of those things were right at the end. But all of those different little parts of our school, it's rewarding when you see that look on those kids' eyes the first time that they get to be a part of that facility. It's a really neat thing.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know Coach Reed and Benton Kelly didn't really let you start off slow, seeing as that baseball field was torn apart probably on day one for you.
No, the good news about that is those guys knew what they wanted and what they were going to do, and I just stood back and let them do it. At that point, I really had no idea what was going on, and I just kind of kept my head down and let them guys do their work. They knew what they wanted, and they did a good job.
So now that you are just into a principal role only, I mean, I know you served as that while you were athletic director. What's one thing you missed just from the athletic side?
A couple of things probably. First of all, I developed a lot of good relationships with ADs across the state of Missouri. And it's kind of like a big fraternity being an activities director. For the most part, most schools have one activities director. And so when you have some reflection on your position, your job, different situations that are going on, you really have to reach out to other school districts. It's unique in that way where most school districts have 2 or 3 people that do that job. But if you're the only one that does that position and you need some reflection on a situation that's taking place, you really reach out to other school districts and pose hypothetical situations. You never use names or anything like that, but you hypothetically speaking, and they, you build those bonds and they give you good feedback. So I do miss those relationships. I also miss that immediate impact that you can see on students and coaches. Being an assistant principal, I'm hoping that I have that impact. I just don't see the quick result of it. If there's a situation happen in a particular program and I can pull the coach in and have that conversation, typically I can see the result of that conversation and trying to help them, within a couple of days. You don't really see that in the assistant principal role as much. I hope I'm having that impact that I did as an activities director, now as an assistant principal with students and our teaching staff, but I just don't see it as quickly. So that's the part I don't like quite as much.
One thing I'm going to guess you probably don't miss is baseball games. If we're going to be rained out or not, calling and asking me, saying I need to know by 1, and my normal response is I can tell you by 2.
Yeah, no, that part I definitely don't miss. I tell you what, most of my years as AD and when we had weather issues on all of our fields at the time, Mr. Thompson's a little luckier that our stadium field is turf now, so it's not as aggravating. But when weather pops up for baseball and softball, it is aggravating. But that's just part of the job. You have to sit around and wait as long as you can. And you guys did a great job. There was a lot of days where we had games that it was rained out in the rest of the part of the state unless they had a turf field, and somehow you guys worked your butts off and got our fields ready to play. So you guys did a great job. So you guys were great to work with, and I'd wait as long as we possibly could.
So I know you're a big Mizzou guy, so everybody else now knows. There's a question out there. With Quanzo Martin being let go, who takes over at Mizzou on the basketball side?
Well, that's a good question. I am a huge Mizzou fan, both football and basketball.
Yeah. Mr. Herman said you probably had some time to think about this one a lot already. So.
I have. I will tell you that you kind of go through and look at all the different possibilities out there. Obviously, there's a lot of people that would not even consider the Missouri job. So you look at the guys that might consider it, and I'll be honest, after thinking about it for a while, I think I would take a chance on Kim English, former Mizzou Tiger. And the reason why is, you have all those different guys at mid-majors, even some others maybe success at a high major. But what you don't know is if any of them are going to be successful at Missouri. You don't know that. It's just a guess. And what you do know about Kim English is that he loves Missouri. And so if he is successful, you're going to keep him. And that's the bonus of it. Some other guys you get at a mid-major and they come to Missouri and they're successful for 3 or 4 years, that's great. But then he might make that jump to a big time, what you consider a big time or a blue blood, a Kentucky or a North Carolina or a Duke or something like that. But if at Missouri, if you have a Missouri kid like Kim English, you hope that he would stay here for his career.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the Kim English train too, just to see what happens. All right, well, that's pretty much it. I had one more for you, but I know the answer already, so I won't even. I was going to ask you who your favorite class was at Pacific, but since I was your first freshman class, I know that answer already.
Actually, you guys had a really good class. You say that in jest, but to be honest, you guys had a lot of really good personalities and a lot of good athletes, so it was a fun class.
So I'd like to thank you for joining me today. It was a fun time kind of going back over all the things that had happened, especially because I was in school for some and just started coaching during some of them. Thank you again. That's my guest, Andy Herbst, joining us this week. And until next week, everybody, please keep up the chatter.